I never imagined that our 5-element sect had such a terrifying inscription formation. I originally thought that with concept fragments, my speed in comprehending concepts was already fast. But in front of the profound formation, that speed was nothing. Unbelievable. It's too unbelievable. How can there be such an unbelievable inscription formation in cloud-soaring continent? However, while this profound formation is terrifying, it's not something everyone can afford. Each activation consumes at least several hundred concept fragments. No wonder I've been in the 5-element sect for so many years and never heard of this profound formation. Such a consumption is difficult for even our 5-element sect to bear. The profound formation will open in 10 days. This time, the sect has truly gone all out. The 10 young disciples who can enter will be blessed. A group of 5-element sect disciples went completely crazy after learning about the function of the profound formation. Envious gazes shot out from their eyes, falling upon Duanling Tian, Nangong Chen, Nangong Yi, and others. They knew in their hearts that the 10 young disciples who displayed extraordinary strength today would experience a complete transformation or even a meteoric rise in their comprehension of concepts 10 days later. In 10 days, the profound formation, I'm really looking forward to it. Tian Zhen, the son of the Earth Peak Master, had now emerged from the shadows of defeat, his eyes shining brightly. This time, my goal is the 7th level intermediate water concept. Tan Huan, the direct disciple of the Water Peak. Master, her eyes flashed, revealing immense confidence. Although her cultivation had now broken through to the void-prying stage 6th level, in terms of concept comprehension, she had only comprehended the 5th level intermediate water concept, profound formation. In 10 days, I will definitely comprehend the 9th level intermediate fire concept. I will not allow those Nangong brothers to continue to suppress me. Hu Fei, the direct disciple of the Fire Peak Master, had a stern face, a hint of coldness on his lips. And that Duanling Tian? One day, I will make him wish he were dead. Thinking of this, Hu Fei's cold gaze once again swept over Duanling Tian. Although they were far apart, Duanling Tian still sensed Hu Fei's chilling gaze, feeling as if a cold wind had swept across his back, sending shivers down his spine. Hu Fei, in 10 days, I'll give you a surprise. A faint, almost imperceptible smile appeared on Duanling Tian's lips. At this moment, he seemed to have transformed into a master, holding Hu Fei's fate in his hands. And in the profound formation 10 days later, Duanling Tian indeed had the ability to become a master. After all, that profound formation was created by the reincarnation Martial Emperor himself. He had merged with the reincarnation Martial Emperor's 2 lifetimes of memories, making him no different from the reincarnation Martial Emperor himself. When the 5-element sect higher-ups and disciples dispersed, they were all discussing the profound formation. As for the 5 peaks battle, and they temporarily cast it aside. After all, the profound formation was truly too astonishing. Duanling Tian, Huang Danyu, and Qi Yu, Yangling, Kezheng, Shenwei left together, returning to Wood Peak. On the way, Shenwei sighed, I've been in the 5-element sect for almost 20 years, yet this is the first time I've heard of that profound formation. Duanling Tian, Dan Yu, when you enter it, you must do your best. Don't worry, Huang Danyu grinned. This time, I will definitely comprehend the 8th level intermediate earth concept. Maybe, if I'm lucky, I'll directly comprehend the 9th level intermediate earth concept. 9th level intermediate earth concept? Hearing Huang Danyu's words, even Qi Yu, the Wood Peak Master, couldn't help but twitch his mouth, feeling that Huang Danyu was too greedy. Duanling Tian also couldn't help but smile wryly. This Danyu, does he really think the profound formation opened by the 5-element sect is that unbelievable? According to Duanling Tian's estimation, in 10 days, when the 5-element sect opens the profound formation, the concept fragments consumed will definitely be some low-level concept fragments. If a martial artist uses these concept fragments individually and comprehends them for a long time, the improvement might be significant. But placed inside the profound formation, they would be quickly consumed, and each one's effect on the martial artist would not be great. It mainly relies on accumulation through quantity. This was also the drawback of the profound formation. It consumed too many concept fragments. If hundreds of concept fragments of the 7th level and above were put in at once, the effect would be completely different. However, even if the 5-element sect puts a pile of low-level concept fragments into the profound formation, I will use it to quickly improve my 4 concepts and elevate my strength to a higher level. Duanling Tian's eyes flashed. As he secretly made up his mind, he was confident about this. With my current spiritual power, although I can't say I can completely seize control of the profound formation, making some adjustments within it is still not a problem. Duanling Tian thought to himself. If Duanling Tian's words were heard by the five-element sect's higher-ups, they would probably be stunned. One must know that their five-element sect's Gold Peak's profound formation was personally set up by a Martial Emperor stage inscription master, whom the five-element sect had paid a huge price to, invite, many years ago. And now, Duanling Tian, who hadn't even entered the Void transformation stage, claimed he wanted to make some adjustments within it. If that Martial Emperor expert knew, he would probably be so angry that he would vomit 3 liters of blood. After returning to Wood Peak, Duanling Tian and Huang Danyu parted ways with Qi Yu and the others, returning to the 3-story pavilion where they had been staying. Brother Duan, big guy. As Duanling Tian and Huang Danyu approached the pavilion, they heard a familiar voice. On the balcony of the pavilion's 2nd floor, a young girl with a radiant smile was waving at them. It was Yeshuan, who had come to the five-element sect with Duanling Tian a while ago. Xiaoxuan, Duanling Tian and Huang Danyu flew onto the 2nd floor balcony of the pavilion together, and Duanling Tian smiled as he greeted Yeshuan. Heh. Xuan girl, you couldn't witness the 5 Peaks battle in person. Are you itching to know? Huang Danyu grinned. It's a pity. You didn't get to see my unparalleled demeanor, Brother New. Who cares to see you? Yeshuan wrinkled her delicate nose and snorted. Immediately after, her gaze fell on Duanling Tian, her eyes sparkling. Brother Duan, what was the result? Not bad, Duanling Tian smiled. Not bad? Yeshuan was momentarily stunned, a little puzzled. Xuan girl, with me and Duanling Tian personally taking action, do you still need to ask about the result? If we couldn't make Wood Peak the #1 peak of the five-element sect, we'd be too embarrassed to come. Back, Huang Danyu said with a boisterous laugh. Braggart. Yeshuan had an expression that said, you can't fool me. Don't think I don't know. In the past history of the five-element sect, the 4 peaks, Wood Peak, Water Peak, Fire Peak, and Earth Peak, have never been able to overpower Gold Peak and become the #1 peak of the five-element sect during the 5 peaks. Battle. You also said, that's the past history of the five-element sect. What if I told you that this history of the five-element sect has been broken today? Huang Danyu continued to smile. Broken? Yeshuan was startled, vaguely realizing that Huang Danyu didn't seem to be joking. However, she didn't quite believe Huang Danyu and instead looked at Duanling Tian beside her. In her heart, only Duanling Tian could earn her complete, unconditional trust. What Danyu said is true. Seeing Yeshuan look over, Duanling Tian smiled and nodded. Xiaoxuan, from today onwards, for the next 3 years, our Wood Peak will be the #1 peak of the five-element sect. The #1 peak of the five-element sect. Yeshuan naturally believed Duanling Tian's words, but she was still stunned. Although she hadn't been in the five-element sect in Wood Peak for long, she still knew what #1 peak of the five-element sect represented and signified. And now, for the next 3 years, Wood Peak would replace Gold Peak and become the #1 peak of the five-element sect. All of this was thanks to the 2 people standing before her. For a moment, she couldn't help but feel a little excited. Brother Duan, please tell me in detail about today's 5 Peaks battle. Yeshuan had always regretted not being able to witness the 5 Peaks battle in first hand today, but there was nothing she could do. She hadn't yet entered the void-prying stage and couldn't stand in midair. Let Danyu tell you. Duanling Tian smiled. Big guy, you tell me. Yeshuan looked at Huang Danyu, frowning as she spoke. I say, Xuan girl, you call Duanling Tian Brother Duan, but you call me big guy. Isn't that a bit impolite? Huang Danyu narrowed his eyes, a smile on his face, and slowly asked, if you don't tell me now, next time you cultivate, I'll set your room on fire. Seeing Huang Danyu trying to take advantage, Yeshuan glared, threatening him. Threatened. By Yeshuan, the smile on Huang Danyu's face instantly froze and completely fell. He was really afraid that Yeshuan would do something like that while he was cultivating. As for the mischievous and terrifying Yeshuan, not to mention that he couldn't bear to do anything to her, even if he really wanted to, Duanling Tian probably wouldn't agree. I'm scared of you. Huang Danyu shook his head, then roughly explained the situation of today's 5 Peaks battle, starting by boasting about how heroic he was. Xuan girl, you didn't see it then? That Hufei was sent flying by 1 punch from me? You're amazing, I guess, Yeshuan snorted. But you weren't a match for those Nangong brothers from Gold Peak. It seems that the reason Wood Peak can become the #1 peak of the five-element sect for the next 3 years is all thanks to my brother Duan, and has nothing to do with you. Xuan girl, you can't say such things carelessly. Even if Duanling Tian hadn't made a move, our Wood Peak could still become the 2nd peak of the five-element sect for the next 3 years. Huang Danyu immediately became anxious, seeing Yeshuan dismiss his contributions with a single sentence. You also said second. Can second compare to first? Yeshuan said, as a matter of course, moreover with brother, Duan's innate divine ability, even without you in the team battle, wouldn't Wood Peak still be able to win first? Yeshuan's words completely deflated Huang Danu. Indeed, even without him, Duan Lingtian's strength alone would be enough to help Wood Peak win the first place honor in this Five Peaks battle. All right, Duan Lingtian couldn't stand it anymore and interjected, "Today, Danu defeated Hufei of Fire Peak, not only avenging Elder Yang, but also bringing us a grand opening for Wood Peak. His contributions are invaluable." Huang Danu immediately smiled at these words, glancing triumphantly at Yeshuan. Yeshuan, in turn, rolled her eyes at him, not bothering to pay him any mind. "Everyone, go back and cultivate." Duan Lingtian looked helplessly at the two lively characters in front of him, greeted them, and was the first to return to his room. Back in his room, Duan Lingtian sat cross-legged on the bed, sensing the transformed true origin within him, and a brilliant smile couldn't help but appear on his face. 7th level of the Void Prying Stage. When he broke through just now, everything happened in an instant, so fast that Duan Lingtian felt as if he were dreaming. Not only did I break through to the 7th level of the Void Prying Stage, the bottleneck to the 8th level of the Void Prying Stage has also appeared. It won't be long before I can further break through to the 8th level of the Void Prying Stage. At this thought, Duan Lingtian's heart surged with excitement, and it took a long time for him to calm down. My cultivation is broken through, and my spiritual force has advanced further, leaving my concept far behind. However, in 10 days, my concept will also have a new breakthrough. Thinking of the profound array, a smile appeared on Duan Lingtian's face. In his opinion, the profound array was like a timely rain, arriving just when his comprehension of the concept was relatively low. There are still 10 days. If I can further break through to the 8th level of the Void Prying Stage within these 10 days, that would be amazing. At this thought, Duan Lingtian no longer dared to hesitate, hurriedly closed his eyes and focused on cultivating. Madhap. 9 dragons, War Sovereign Art, Sword Dragon Transformation. The true origin within Duan Lingtian's body surged, bringing with it a trace of the Nirvana Pill's medicinal power. But this medicinal power was far less overbearing than before. I have successively stimulated the Nirvana Pill's medicinal power with external true origin and external spiritual force. Now, it has become a frightened bird. In the future, it will be impossible to stimulate it in the same way. Duan Lingtian was very clear about this. In the future, unless he consumed spiritual fruits to further activate the Nirvana Pill's medicinal power, he would only be able to gradually reveal the Nirvana Pill's medicinal power by continuously improving his cultivation, helping him to advance his cultivation faster. Duan Lingtian's goal was to break through to the 8th level of the Void Prying Stage within 10 days. But facts proved that this was merely a goal. Imagination is beautiful, reality is cruel. 10 days passed, and the bottleneck leading to the 8th level of the Void Prying Stage within Duan Lingtian's body remained unmoved. Duan Lingtian. Familiar voice reached his ears, waking Duan Lingtian from his cultivation. He couldn't help but sigh. I was still too greedy. Unless I have spiritual fruits, it will probably take at least 2 or 3 months to achieve a breakthrough. Has it been 10 days? Duan Lingtian opened his door and looked at Huang Danu outside, asking curiously, "You really do forget the time when you cultivate. Today is the day we go to Gold Peak and enter the Profound Array. The Peak Master is already waiting for us," Huang Danu said with a smile. "Let's go." Duan Lingtian nodded, then, together, with Huang Danu, rose into the air and soon saw Chi Yu waiting high above. "Peak Master," Duan Lingtian greeted him. Chi Yu smiled and nodded in response. "Let's go." Immediately after, without waiting for Duan Lingtian and Huang Danu to respond, he raised his hand and a vast, boundless, invisible force swept out, enveloping Duan Lingtian and Huang Danu. Feeling this powerful and oppressive force, Duan Lingtian and Huang Danu both changed their expressions. The next moment, they found that the force enveloping them trembled but did not harm them, causing them to breathe a sigh of relief. "We've arrived." At the same time, Chi Yu's voice reached their ears. When they focused their gaze forward and saw the familiar-looking mountain peak in front of them, they both looked stunned. Gold? Gold Peak? Huang Danu's mouth hung open for a long time, unable to close. One moment he was at Wood Peak, the next he was at Gold Peak. Although the two peaks were not far apart, appearing from one to the other in the blink of an eye left, Huang Danu profoundly shocked. Such incredible speed. Duan Lingtian's pupils contracted slightly, his heart secretly startled. This Wood Peak Master was definitely not a simple 9th level Void Transformation Stage expert. He was very likely a Peak Void Stage powerhouse. Otherwise, he couldn't possibly have such speed. We're a bit late. Qiyu seemed to sense something, smiled faintly, and then, taking Duan Lingtian and Huang Danu, swept into a platform on the mountainside of the gold peak in front of them. Duan Lingtian followed closely, and when they arrived at the entrance of a spacious palace on the platform, he finally understood why Qiyu said they were a bit late. Inside the palace, besides the five-element sect master, Guo Chong, and his two direct disciples, the three peak masters of Water Peak, Fire Peak, and Earth Peak had also arrived. By their side, two young people stood respectively. Duan Lingtian and Huang Danu walked side by side, following behind Qiyu into the palace. At the same time, Duan Lingtian curiously surveyed his surroundings, discovering that the palace was permeated with the aura of inscription, clearly adorned with many inscription arrays. Oh? Suddenly, Duan Lingtian's eyebrows raised, and he looked towards the spacious high platform inside the palace. Within the high platform, Duan Lingtian's spiritual force detected traces of a familiar inscription array aura. Of course, he himself was sensing this aura for the first time. The reason he called it familiar was because the Rebirth Martial Emperor was familiar with it. As Duan Lingtian, who had merged with the Rebirth Martial Emperor's 2 lifetimes of memories, he naturally also felt it was familiar. Profound array. Duan Lingtian never expected that the profound array would actually be in this palace. For a moment, his heart couldn't help but become a little excited. Qiyu, you and your people from Wood Peak really have a lot of nerve. How dare you make the sect master wait for you? As soon as the three of them entered the palace, Chai Bai, the Fire Peak master, swept his cold gaze over them and spoke with sarcasm. Chai Bai, it seems you really have healed your wounds and forgotten the pain. A hint of disdain appeared at the corner of Qiyu's mouth. Or perhaps I was too light-handed last time. If you need it, I can make you lie in bed for a few months. Any time. Threat. It was a naked threat. Qiyu's words made Chai Bai's face turn pale, then green, filled with anger, but not daring to act on it. Sectmaster, look. Now, this Qiyu is even writing roughshod over you. Chai Bai took a deep breath. He knew he was no match for Qiyu, so he didn't directly confront Qiyu again for a moment. Instead, he looked at Guo Chong and said angrily. However, Guo Chong ignored his provocation, nodded to Qiyu, and then said, Since everyone is here, let's begin. The 10 of you, go up to that high platform and sit down cross-legged each in your own space. After sitting down, take out your concept fragments and begin comprehending. After a quarter of an hour, I will activate the profound array. Guo. Chong's gaze swept over Duan Lingtian and the other 10 people. Then he slowly spoke. After activating the profound array, I will put in hundreds of concept fragments. At that time, those concept fragments will be absorbed by the profound array and then transform into concept power, helping you quickly improve your concept. As for how much you can improve, that will depend on each of your aptitudes and fortunes. Guo Chong finished speaking in one breath. As Guo Chong's voice fell, Nangong Chen and Nangong Yi, the two brothers beside him, flew onto the spacious high platform inside the palace and sat down cross-legged at a distance from each other. Whoosh! 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 A moment later, the 6 people from Water Peak, Fire Peak, and Earth Peak ascended the high platform one by one, sitting down cross-legged separately. Hu Fei's eyes widened, and his sharp gaze swept over the distant purple figure, before he finally closed his eyes, holding a fire concept fragment, and calmly comprehending the fire concept. Tan Huan of Water Peak and Tianjin of Earth Peak also successively closed their eyes, beginning to comprehend concept with the help of concept fragments. The other 3 young disciples of the 3 peaks closed their eyes one by one. Danu, let's go. Duan Lingtian completely ignored Hu Fei's cold gaze, called out to Huang Danu, and together they flew towards the high platform in front. But on his lips there was a faint, almost imperceptible smile, mixed with a hint of mischievousness. Soon, Duan Lingtian and Huang Danu sat down cross-legged separately. Huang Danu quickly entered a state of comprehension, holding an earth concept fragment, oblivious to everything around him. Duan Lingtian also closed his eyes and began to comprehend. However, in his hands, he simultaneously held 2 concept fragments, specifically a wind concept fragment and a lightning concept fragment. It was fortunate that Guo Chong, the 5-element sect master, and the peak masters of the other 4 peaks did not see this scene. Otherwise, they would have been utterly shocked, comprehending 2 different concepts simultaneously with 2 different concept fragments. On the cloud-soaring continent, they had never heard of anyone being able to achieve this. A quarter of an hour passed, quietly. In the eyes of the 5 peak masters of the 5-element sect, the 10 young talents on the high platform had completely entered a state of concept comprehension. However, they did not notice that one person had not entered that state. This person was none other than Duanling Tian. It's about to begin. Duanling Tian secretly took a deep breath, his heart a little excited. He was waiting for the moment when the 5-element sect master would activate the profound array. Only at that moment could he smoothly integrate his spiritual force into the profound array and do some things he wanted to do. Once he missed this opportunity, with his current spiritual force, he would not be able to interfere with the profound array. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Suddenly, Gochong, the sect leader of the 5-element sect, moved. With a raise of his hand, he shot out 4 white glowing origin stones, which landed in the 4 corners of the spacious high platform. Almost as soon as the 4 origin stones landed, a white, misty fog surged up from the entire platform, engulfing the figures of the 10 young prodigies on it. Clearly, this was an inscription formation. To be precise, it was a profundity formation. Buzz! Almost at the same moment, the 4 origin stones landed in the corners of the spacious high platform. The mental energy that Duanling Tian, who was sitting cross-legged on the platform, had already accumulated in his mind, surged out. In a moment, it followed the mental energy extending from the various materials that made up the profundity formation and merged into the formation, like a fish in water. It's done. Now, I just need to wait for those hundreds of profundity fragments. As soon as those profundity fragments touch the profundity formation, they will instantly be refined and transformed into profundity energy. Generally speaking, the profundity energy that can be absorbed by the person inside the profundity formation will not exceed 1%. But with the head start I have now, and the Rebirth Martial Emperor's understanding of the profundity formation, I can extract 1/10 of the profundity energy to help me enhance the profundity I've comprehended. This was precisely Duanling Tian's goal. It wasn't that Duanling Tian didn't want to extract all the profundity energy refined by the profundity formation, but rather that he simply couldn't do it now. 1/10 was already the limit estimated with his current mental energy. After all, his current mental energy was only at void prying stage 8, which was still too weak in front of the profundity formation. The minimum requirement for setting up a profundity formation was mental energy at or above the Martial Emperor stage. With his current mental energy, wanting to snatch food from under the nose of the profundity formation, being able to snatch 1/10 was due to the Rebirth Martial Emperor's thorough understanding of the profundity formation. Otherwise, let alone snatching food from under the nose of the profundity formation, he wouldn't even be able to integrate his mental energy into the profundity formation. Suddenly, Duanling Tian, who was quietly waiting, as if sensing something, his pupils couldn't help but constrict. At the same time, he clearly sensed a strange mental energy suddenly attacking within the profundity formation, then reversing. Along his extended mental energy, directly rushing towards his soul. Not good. Duanling Tian's face changed drastically. Within the profundity formation, there's actually a hidden reversal formation. Damn it. The reversal formation is a passive defensive, one-time inscription formation, usually hidden within other inscription formations, belonging to a formation within a formation. Normally, this reversal formation would show no abnormalities. But once an inscription master's mental energy merges into an inscription formation that hides a reversal formation, the reversal formation will be activated passively, turning into a mirror. The inscription master's mental energy will be copied and reversed back, directly rushing into their soul, damaging their soul. Of course, the prerequisite is that the mental energy of the inscription master, who left the reversal formation, must be stronger than the intruder's mental energy. Otherwise, the reversal formation will not be activated. Now, Duanling Tian was facing an attack of mental energy equivalent in strength to his own. That mental energy rushed directly into the depths of his mind, towards his soul. Although mental energy of this intensity wouldn't completely shatter Duanling Tian's soul, it was enough to cause significant damage to his soul. Boom! The mental energy came very quickly. Just as Duanling Tian reacted, it had already slammed hard into Duanling Tian's soul, as if wanting to completely shatter it. Duanling Tian's soul trembled instantly, making him feel dizzy and his consciousness dim. Even the mental energy that had merged into the profundity formation was almost instinctively withdrawn. But fortunately, Duanling Tian reacted in time and controlled his mental energy, preventing it from leaving the profundity formation. Once his mental energy left the activated profundity formation, all his preparations and efforts today would be in vain. That was not something he wanted to see. Just when Duanling Tian thought his soul would suffer a significant blow, he found that his soul was unharmed, and the surging mental energy had vanished without a trace. But what exactly is going on? Duanling Tian was somewhat confused and instinctively used another surge of mental energy to examine his soul. This examination startled Duanling Tian, almost scaring him out of his wits. The soul imprint is gone? Duanling Tian was stunned, completely stunned. The soul imprint deep within his soul, which was also the basis for him to use the soul skill Thousand Illusions, had now completely disappeared from his soul. Without this soul imprint, it meant he could no longer use the soul skill Thousand Illusions. It was that mental energy. It must have been it that shattered the soul imprint. And it was precisely because the soul imprint blocked that mental energy that my soul remained unharmed. Duanling Tian could easily guess this point. The loss of the soul imprint meant the loss of the soul skill Thousand Illusions. From now on, he could no longer use the soul skill Thousand Illusions against enemies, nor could he use that mysterious and unpredictable illusionary space to toy with opponents. It must be said, Duanling Tian was very disappointed, very disappointed. The soul skill Thousand Illusions had accompanied him for a long time. Along the way, it had saved him from dire situations many times and granted him the ability to defeat the strong with the weak, defeating many martial artists stronger than him, and now the soul skill Thousand Illusions was gone, leaving him. Suddenly, Duanling Tian's mental energy trembled, giving him a jolt, and temporarily pushing aside the disappointment of his soul imprint being shattered and the soul skill Thousand Illusions disappearing with it. At the same time, he could clearly sense that the originally calm profundity formation suddenly became restless. Without thinking, he could guess the reason for the profundity formation's restlessness. Guo Chong, the sect leader of the Five-Element sect, was finally about to throw hundreds of soul fragments into the profundity formation. The soul imprint is gone. The soul skill Thousand Illusions is gone. It's a foregone conclusion and cannot be changed. What I need to do now is seize this opportunity and make my 4 profundities soar. Duanling Tian's mood quickly adjusted, and he looked forward to the arrival of those hundreds of profundity fragments. He knew in his heart that without the soul imprint and without the soul skill Thousand Illusions, he was nothing among the group of young prodigies in the Five-Element sect, let alone the 2 Nangang brothers of Gold Peak. Even Hu Fei of Fire Peak could easily crush him. Hu Fei, Void Prying Stage 7, comprehended 7-fold mid-grade fire profundity, and him, Void Prying Stage 7, comprehended 3-fold mid-grade wind profundity, and the remaining 3 low-grade profundities combined didn't exceed the strength of 10 ancient horned dragons. How could he compare to Hu Fei? Even if he used the quasi-emperor grade spirit sword in his hand, he was still far from Hu Fei's match. Although Duanling Tian was unwilling to admit it, he had to admit it. Without the soul skill Thousand Illusions, to a certain extent he was just a waste with high cultivation but low strength. Therefore, he must seize this opportunity. If he couldn't seize this opportunity, he would be trampled underfoot by Hu Fei. Was he willing to be trampled underfoot by Hu Fei? Of course not. This time, I will use the profundity formation to gain the power to defeat Hu Fei, and even the Nangong brothers, Nangong Chen and Nangong Yi, without using the soul skill Thousand Illusions. Duanling Tian's heart was filled with longing, endless longing. Duanling Tian's unusual movements were completely enveloped by the profundity formation, which had turned into a misty mass, so the peak masters of the various peaks of the Five-Element sect outside naturally did not notice. Currently, the sect leader of the Five-Element sect, who was also the Gold Peak Master, Guo Chong, was standing in front of the high platform. In the void before him, hundreds of profundity fragments were suspended, held aloft by an invisible force, remaining motionless for a long time. These profundity fragments were green, red, blue, purple, and earthy yellow. These 5 colors respectively represented the 5 natural profundities of wind, fire, water, thunder, and earth, corresponding to the profundity fragments of these 5 profundities. Of course, in addition to these 5 colors of profundity fragments, there were also 2 other types of profundity fragments, emitting sharp auras. These 2 types of profundity fragments had subtle visible light flickering on their surfaces. The light either condensed into a sword or a saber. These were precisely sword profundity fragments and saber profundity fragments. However, compared to the profundity fragments of the 4 natural profundities of wind, fire, water, thunder, and earth, the sword profundity fragments and saber profundity fragments were much fewer in number. Do you have any sword profundity fragments? Or saber profundity fragments on you? I remember that the Void Prying Stage 5 disciple from Fire Peak comprehended sword profundity. The Void Prying Stage 5 disciple from Earth Peak comprehended saber profundity. Gochong looked at the peak masters of the other 4 peaks and slowly asked. His words clearly indicated that he felt there were too few sword profundity fragments and saber profundity fragments. I have 23 sword profundities. Fragments in my hand, with the lowest being 1st level and the highest being 4th level. Chabai, the Fire Peak Master, raised his hand and took out 13 sword profundity fragments. I also have 21 saber profundity fragments. Here, Tiangu, the Earth Peak Master, also took out 11 saber profundity fragments. As for Chiyu, the Wood Peak Master, and Tanhuan, the Water Peak Master, they made no moves. The various peaks of the 5 Element sect were inherently in a competitive relationship, and they wouldn't do something that would benefit the disciples of other peaks. Moreover, whether it was Chabai or Tiangu, the profundity fragments they took out now were all beneficial to their own peak's disciples. If they were asked to take out other profundity fragments, they certainly wouldn't be willing. That's enough. After gathering the sword profundity fragments and saber profundity fragments that Chabai and Tiangu took out with the hundreds of profundity fragments in front of him, Gochong's eyes suddenly lit up. Hearing Gochong's words, the eyes of the other 4 peak masters also lit up. Whoosh! Suddenly, Gochong raised his hand. Immediately, the hundreds of concept fragments floating in front of him rained down towards the profound connection array that enveloped the entire high platform. Whoosh, 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 1. By 1, the concept fragments fell into the mist, enveloping the high platform and disappeared. They're here. Inside the profound connection array, Duanling Tian, who had integrated his spiritual energy into it, immediately detected the appearance of hundreds of concept fragments. After these concept fragments entered the profound connection array, they were quickly refined into streams of concept energy. These streams of concept energy soon spread throughout the space within the profound connection array. Opening his eyes, Duanling Tian could clearly see these solidified concept energies. There were a total of 7 types of concept energies. 5 of them were green, red, blue, purple, and earthy yellow. Clearly concept energies, formed from wind, fire, water, lightning, and earth concept fragments respectively. The other 2 had no color, but around them faint wisps of solidified true energy permeated, shaped like swords or sabers. These were clearly concept energies, formed from sword concept fragments and saber concept fragments. It's a pity I've only comprehended the wind concept, lightning concept, earth concept, and sword concept. Otherwise, my gains this time would definitely be even greater. Duanling Tian took a deep breath, and his spiritual energy began to move within the profound connection array, following the memories of the reincarnation Martial Emperor, controlling the profound connection array as much as possible. At the same time, 1/10 of the green concept energy, purple concept energy, earthy yellow concept energy, and the concept energy permeated with sword-shaped true energy, which filled the profound connection array, separated. The 4 separated types of concept energy shimmered in the air and flew towards the same direction. That direction was precisely where Ling Tian was. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. The concept energy, derived from a large number of wind concept fragments, lightning concept fragments, earth concept fragments, and sword concept fragments, surged into Duanling Tian's body. At the same time, 4 solidified. Concepts emanated from Duanling Tian's body, becoming increasingly vast and profound. These were the wind concept, lightning concept, earth concept, and sword concept. The 4 concepts gradually grew stronger and transformed. They were clearly continuously digesting the 4 streams of concept energy that had surged into Duanling Tian's body. Once the 4 streams of concept energy were completely digested, the 4 concepts would complete their final transformation. When he separated the 4 types of concept energy he needed and caused them to surge into his body, Duanling Tian only felt his spiritual energy, which had merged into the profound connection array and was more than 90% depleted, tremble, as if it was about to be forced out of the profound connection array. And with my current spiritual energy, it's not enough to separate more concept energy. However, I can still make someone inside the profound connection array be repelled by concept energy. With a thought, Duanling Tian's last bit of spiritual ice energy once again pierced into the profound connection array, issuing the final command. At the same time, Duanling Tian's spiritual energy, which had merged into the profound connection array, was completely exhausted. If Duanling Tian were to open his eyes now, he would surely see it immediately. Hu Fei, the personal disciple of the Wood Peak Master, a red figure also inside the profound connection array, was sitting cross-legged not far away, and a resistance had clearly appeared around his body. As soon as this resistance appeared, the red concept energy, which was the concept energy, formed from fire concept fragments that had originally approached him, was completely pushed away, unable to get close to him at all. At this very moment, that red concept energy gradually dissipated, soon vanishing without a trace. The other 8 people absorbed more or less some of the concept energy they needed, but only 1% of the total concept energy integrated into their bodies. The remaining concept energy simply disappeared into the profound connection array, as if it had been swallowed whole by the array. Even just 1% of the concept energy was enough to greatly benefit the 8 people. Time quietly flowed by. 1 hour passed. 2 hours passed. Outside the profound connection array, beyond the high platform, the 5 peak masters of the 5-element sect waited there. Their gazes remained fixed on the profound connection array, filled with anticipation. They all wanted to know to what extent the concepts comprehended by the young talents from their respective peaks, who had entered the profound connection array, had improved. 5 hours quickly passed. However, the mist on the high platform had not disappeared, which meant that the profound connection array was still active, and the concept energy, formed from the concept fragments, had not yet been fully digested by the people inside. "What's going on?" Yu Feng, the Water Peak Master, frowned. "Something seems wrong. I remember when we entered the profound connection array back then, we all came out in just 3 hours. I also find it a bit strange." Tiangu, the Earth Peak Master, nodded. "It's a pity that my spiritual energy can't penetrate this profound connection array, so I can't investigate the situation inside. There's only one possibility. Someone hasn't fully digested the concept energy that surged into their body." Chai Bai, the Fire Peak Master, said with a solemn expression. "It seems that this generation of disciples has given us a big surprise. The longer they stay inside, the more benefits they will gain." Guo Chong, the Golden Peak Master, and also the sect leader of the 5-element sect, said with a look of pleasant surprise. Chi Yu, the Wood Peak Master, stood beside him, also with a look of anticipation. "Duanling Tian, could it be you?" Chi Yu silently wondered in his heart. Inside the profound connection array, even those young talents who had completely digested the absorbed concept energy and improved their comprehended concepts were still unable to wake up temporarily due to the presence of the profound connection array. Once they entered a state of concept comprehension and were enveloped by the profound connection array, they would not awaken as long as the profound connection array remained. At this time, they couldn't even perceive the changes in the concepts they had comprehended. Only when the profound connection array completely disappeared would they be able to sense the changes in their comprehended concepts and awaken immediately. And making the profound connection array disappear was simple, as long as the concept energy permeating the profound connection array, including the concept energy within the bodies of the people inside the profound connection array, completely disappeared, it would vanish with it. Currently, the only conscious person inside the profound connection array was Duanling Tian. So exhilarating. Clearly sensing that his 4 comprehended concepts were still continuously improving, Duanling Tian was in a great mood. Originally, it would take me at least 120 hours to completely digest these 4 streams of concept energy. But because I can comprehend 2 different concept energies simultaneously, it only takes half the time, Duanling Tian thought to himself. For people like Huang Danyu, absorbing and digesting 1% of a type of concept energy took 3 hours. For him, absorbing and digesting 1/10 of a type of concept energy took 30 hours. 4 types would be 120 hours. Because he could comprehend 2 different concepts simultaneously, it was more efficient, and the time was halved, meaning 60 hours. Now, 5 hours have passed. I still need 55 hours, with a, thought Ginam. Duanling Tian re-immersed himself in the rapidly improving 4 concepts. This rocket-like feeling made him feel incredibly refreshed from the bottom of his heart. Wind, sometimes gentle, sometimes swift. Lightning, sometimes restrained, sometimes violent. Sword, sometimes calm, sometimes sharp. The earth made Duanling Tian feel as if he had merged with the entire land beneath him, no longer distinguishing between them. Inside the profound connection array, Duanling Tian, who was fully digesting the 4 types of concept energy and fully improving his comprehended concepts, was in a great mood, only wishing this moment could last forever. However, the 5 people outside the profound connection array were completely anxious. 10 hours have passed, and the profound connection array still hasn't disappeared. Could something have gone wrong inside? Tiangu speculated with a worried expression. It shouldn't. Yufang shook her head. This profound connection array was set up by our 5-element sect's predecessors, who sought a inscription master of the Martial Emperor realm. It has never had any problems, and this time should be no exception. But this time it's really too long. In the history of our 5 Elements sect, no matter when the profound connection array was activated, it basically always finished in 3 hours. Chaibai's brows were tightly furrowed, and his face was slightly grim. At this moment, even Guo Chong, the sect leader of the 5 Elements sect, was no longer as calm as before. 10 hours. What exactly happened inside? Soon, Guo Chong looked at Chiyu, who was standing beside him with a calm expression. Chiyu, what do you think? What can I think? Chiyu shrugged and smiled faintly. Now, what's the use of us being anxious? Are we going to forcefully break this profound connection array and go inside to check on those little ones? Chiyu's words made Tiangu couldn't help but smile bitterly. That's the inscription array set up by a Martial Emperor powerhouse. How could a few of us forcefully break it? For the profound connection array, we only know how to activate it, but not how to deactivate it. According to the Martial Emperor Senior from back then, once the concept energy is completely absorbed and digested by the people inside the profound connection array, the profound connection array will completely close. It has always been this way. Guo Chong's brows furrowed slightly as he continued. But this time, it's a bit strange. Could it be that someone still hasn't completely absorbed and digested the concept energy even now? 10 hours have already passed. If that's truly the case, to what extent will his concept have improved? Guo Chong's words reminded the other 4 peak masters, including Chi Yu, and for a moment they couldn't help but show looks of surprise. That's right. If someone truly hasn't fully absorbed and assimilated the power of intent contained within the profound formation by now, to what extent will their intent be elevated? That should be impossible. Soon, Tiangu seemed to recall something, shook his head and frowned. Since the profound formation became popular throughout the Cloud Continent thousands of years ago, I've never heard of anyone being able to stay inside for 3.5 hours, let alone 10 hours. It's usually around 3 hours. Perhaps something unexpected happened inside the profound formation. Tiangu stated his conjecture. What you said does make some sense. You? Fang, standing nearby, nodded, a hint of worry in his brows. If something really did happen inside the profound formation, will they be all right? As soon as Yufeng spoke, the expressions of Guo Chong, Chi Yu, and Chabai became somewhat solemn. Tiangu's earlier words had resonated with them as well. Now, after Yufeng's remark, they couldn't help but feel worried about the safety of the disciples from their peaks, who were inside the profound formation. Time quietly passed. A day quickly went by. It's been a day and there's still no movement. No, I must try to break into this profound formation. Chabai had waited for a day and could no longer hold back, so he flew out. With a raise of his hand, a flame blade condensed into shape in his hand and whistled down. Buzz! The flame blade struck fiercely into the profound formation, moving with great momentum, but upon touching the mist enveloping the formation, it completely vanished. The mist covering the profound formation was like a terrifying demon beast, opening its gaping maw and swallowing the flame blade. It's no use. Seeing that Chabai still intended to make a move, Tiangu shook his head and said, "That is an inscription formation set up by a Martial Emperor realm expert, and it's a profound formation that requires extremely high spiritual power. Unless you are a Martial Emperor expert, it's impossible to forcibly destroy it." Tiangu himself was an inscription master and had absolute authority in this regard. Therefore, after hearing Tiangu's words, although Chabai's expression was still somewhat grim, he no longer acted as impulsively as before. "Peak Master Chabai, we can understand your feelings." Yufeng showed a helpless, bitter smile. "But just as Peak Master Chi Yu said earlier, all we can do now is wait for the profound formation to close on its own, and wait for them to come out." Chabai nodded, then glanced at Guo Chong and Chi Yu, who were sitting cross-legged in the air nearby, took a deep breath, and also sat cross-legged in the air. He meditated while waiting for his personal disciple, Hu Fei, to emerge from the profound formation. Soon, another day passed, still no movement. Qi Yu opened his eyes, gazed at the profound formation on the high platform not far away, and murmured to himself, "Duanling Tian, Huangdan Yu, you 2 little rascals, please don't let anything happen to you. The future of Wood Peak still depends on the 2 of you." As early as when he witnessed Duanling Tian and Huangdan Yu's strength, Qi Yu had regarded the 2 as the future pillars of Wood Peak. In his heart, he even harbored the idea of cultivating one of them to be the next peak master of Wood Peak. Of course, the reason he considered choosing one of the 2 was not because he thought their talents were equal and thus difficult to choose between. Rather, he felt that Duanling Tian was unlikely to remain in Wood Peak, or in the 5 Elements sect in the future. After all, Duanling Tian was an anomaly, widely recognized as heaven's favored child on the Cloud Continent, and such an existence was destined not to be confined by the Five-Element Sect. The Five-Element Sect, looking at the region east of the Northern Desert, was considered one of the three major forces. But if one were to look at the entire Cloud Continent, it was merely a small, third-rate force in a borderland, insignificant in front of those truly powerful forces. As long as Duanling Tian was willing, he would unhesitatingly consider Duanling Tian as the successor to the Wood Peak Master. But if Duanling Tian was unwilling, he would not force him and could only settle for the next best option, choosing Huang Danyu as the successor to the Wood Peak Master. Although Huang Danyu was not as good as Duanling Tian, he was much more outstanding than the other disciples of Wood Peak. What? Are you worried about Duanling Tian and Huang Danyu? Suddenly, a familiar voice condensed from elemental energy reached Qi Yu's ear. He didn't even need to turn his head to know whose voice it was. Aren't you worried about your two precious disciples? Qi Yu glanced at Guochong, who was not far from him, and retorted with a voice condensed from elemental energy. Guochong heard this and immediately gave a wry smile. Could he not be worried? Of course not. After many years of being together and having no children of his own, he had long regarded his two personal disciples as his own flesh and blood. Did you ask Duanling Tian if he intends to stay with our Five-Element Sect in the future? Guochong looked at Qi Yu and asked again with a voice condensed from elemental energy. Immediately after, before Qi Yu could respond, he added, as long as he is willing to stay in the Five-Element Sect, not only can he become the Peak Master of Wood Peak in the future, but even the position of Sect Master of the Five-Element Sect, I can pass it on to him. Guochong's words moved Qi Yu. What about your two personal disciples? Them? Hearing Qi Yu mention the Nangong brothers, Guochong couldn't help but sigh. Those two boys, their ambitions are as high as the sky. They have already decided that, after coming out of that place, they will leave the Five-Element Sect and venture out together to see the outside world. Their aspirations are quite good. Moreover, they have been in the Five-Element Sect since childhood and have never left, so it's not surprising that they yearn for the outside world. Kaiyu nodded. Their hearts are too wild. They cannot inherit the position of Sect Master of the Five-Element Sect. If Duanling Tian is willing, he doesn't even need to come to Gold Peak. I can still pass the position of Sect Master to him, Guochong said. You don't actually think that the position of Sect Master of the Five-Element Sect, which even your two precious disciples disdain, could move Duanling Tian, do you? Qi Yu shook his head, and as he spoke, his tone became solemn. Don't forget, he is an anomaly. Anomaly. Hearing Qi Yu's words, Guochong fell silent. That's right. An anomaly. How monstrous. How could they be bound by their Five-Element Sect? An anomaly. Even the top-tier first-rate forces on the Cloud Continent would probably fight tooth and nail for him. This situation with the profound formation this time, I always feel something is off. Logically speaking, the profound formation shouldn't undergo any changes. Soon, Guochong changed the subject and looked at Qi Yu, asking, You? Say, could this change be related to Duanling Tian? After all, he is an anomaly. You ask me, who should I ask? Qi Yu rolled his eyes at Guochong. Looking at him now, he completely lacked the awareness of being a sect master, instead resembling ordinary senior and junior brothers casually chatting. Guochong was speechless. However, he didn't care about Qi Yu's casualness at all. In front of others, he might still put on the airs of a sect master in front of Qi Yu to show the dignity of a sect master. But privately, when facing Qi Yu, he never regarded himself as a sect master, and still, as always, regarded Qi Yu as the junior brother who had ventured out with him back then. At that time, he had saved Qi Yu's life multiple times, and Qi Yu had also saved his life multiple times. Although he and Qi Yu were not in the same peak and were usually in a competitive relationship, deep down, they were true life-and-death companions. The depth of their friendship within the current Five-Element Sect was known only to themselves. Even the peak masters of the other three peaks did not know that they shared such a bond. Otherwise, the peak master of Fire Peak, Chabai, would not have deliberately tried to sow discord between Guochong and Qi Yu in front of Guochong, the sect master of the Five-Element Sect. If Chabai knew that the two still had such a bond, he would probably be so angry that he would spit blood. It turned out that all his efforts and wasted words were nothing but a huge joke in the eyes of Guochong and Qi Yu. It's been 2 days, and the profound formation still hasn't disappeared. Guochong sighed. Let's wait a little longer. I have a feeling we won't have to wait much longer, Qi Yu said. Guochong nodded, then continued to close his eyes and meditate. Qi Yu also closed his eyes, waiting patiently. Not long after the two closed their eyes, Chabai, who was floating on the other side, slowly opened his eyes. He looked at the high platform enveloped by the profound formation and murmured to himself, Hu Fei, with your proficiency in the intent of fire, this time, with the help of the profound formation, you should have comprehended the 9th level intermediate intent of fire, right? In his words, Chabai placed great expectations on Hu Fei. Not long after, Tiangu and Yufang also opened their eyes, glanced at the high platform enveloped by the profound formation, sighed softly, and then closed their eyes again. Time continued to flow. 1 hour, 2 hours. In the blink of an eye, 7 more hours passed. Inside the profound formation, a purple figure sat there, his body completely enveloped by 4 solidified powers, emitting waves of vast and majestic aura. This was a purple-clothed young man, sitting there, unmoving as a mountain, like an enlightened monk. If one looked closely, it would be easy to notice. Among the 4 powers surrounding the young man's body, 2 were rapidly increasing, emitting a daunting aura along with the other 2 powers. The daunting aura was like wind, roaring, thunder bellowing, the earth trembling. In addition, there was an incomparably sharp aura, following the purple-clothed young man like a shadow. If anyone were here, they would instantly recognize what this sharp aura was. It was the intent of sword, and it seemed not to be an ordinary intent of sword. The power of intent formed by refining the fragments of earth. Intent and sword intent through the profound formation is almost completely assimilated. 5 hours at most. The purple-clothed young man was Duanling Tian, and he murmured to himself in his heart. 5 hours, a time that wasn't too long, quickly passed. When Duanling Tian felt the remaining power of the profound fully integrate into the profound he had comprehended, elevating it to a certain level, he suddenly opened his eyes. At the same time, Duanling Tian noticed the profound array beginning to fluctuate. He knew the profound array was about to close on its own. Ordinary people can stay in the profound array for a maximum of 3 hours. But I've been in here for a full 60 hours. This is only because my consciousness can split into 2, allowing me to comprehend 2 different profound at the same time. Otherwise, I could have stayed for 120 hours. As Duanling Tian's heart stirred, he glanced at the 9 young men and women sitting cross-legged in various spots, a glint in his eyes, and a plan formed in his mind. I absolutely cannot let anyone discover that the profound array stayed open for 60 hours because of me. Otherwise, if this matter spreads, countless people will likely want to learn from me how to stay in the profound array for so long. In that instant, Duanling Tian thought of many things. At the same time, he reined in the 4 vast and majestic profound emanating from his body and closed his eyes again. The profound array was about to close. What he needed to do now was not reveal any clues, leaving no trace for anyone to follow. Anyway, there were 10 people inside the profound array. As long as he didn't give himself away, even if someone suspected him, there would be no evidence, and they wouldn't dare to confirm it. Outside the profound array, in front of the high platform, the 5 peak masters, sitting cross-legged in the air, simultaneously opened their eyes. Their synchronicity was due to their simultaneous awareness of the unusual activity in the profound array. Before them, this profound array is finally closing. Tengu's eyes lit up as he spoke with a hint of surprise. A full 2.5 days have passed. That's 60 hours, Yufang exclaimed. Generally speaking, those inside the profound array stay for a maximum of about 3 hours, but these 10 have stayed for 60 hours, which is quite strange. Chabai's eyes flickered as he slowly spoke. Either something has happened to the profound array, or someone has continuously absorbed profound power for 60 hours. The former is fine, but if it's the latter? Guocheng muttered, his eyes sparkling with brilliance as he finished his sentence. Guocheng's muttering, though not loud, clearly reached the ears of the other 4 peak masters, who all agreed. At the same time, their eyes intently watched the gradually dissipating mist before them. They all wanted to know if someone had truly absorbed profound power for a full 60 hours inside the profound array. If so, to what extent would that person's profound have improved? Duanling Tian, could it be you? Qiyu murmured to himself once more. He always felt that the anomaly of the profound array was somehow connected to Duanling Tian. Perhaps it was precisely because Duanling Tian was an anomaly that he thought this way. The gradual dissipation of the mist also signified the closing of the profound array. Once the profound array completely closed, the mist on the high platform vanished without a trace, leaving only 10 young men and women sitting cross-legged in various spots, their eyes closed without any movement. Seeing their disciples safe and sound, the 5 peak masters couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. At the same time, recalling that the profound array had opened after 60 hours, their gazes swept over the 10 individuals on the high platform, as if trying to discern if someone had truly absorbed profound power for 60 hours. If so, even if that person had only comprehended first level void prying profound before, they would surely have advanced to fourth level void transformation profound, or higher, after emerging from the profound array. They had once had the good fortune to enter the profound array themselves, and knew how much it could enhance a martial artist. 3 hours were enough to help someone advance 1 or 2 levels in void prying profound. 60 hours, which was 20 times 3 hours, absorbing profound power for such a long time, the enhancement to one's profound could be imagined. Therefore, they all wanted to know now whether any of the 10 young prodigies had indeed continuously absorbed a large amount of profound power for 60 hours, or if something was truly wrong with the profound array. Soon, including Duanling Tian, the 10 young prodigies sitting cross-legged on the high platform successively opened their eyes. The moment they opened their eyes, a hint of bewilderment was mixed on the faces of all 10. Duanling Tian was no exception. To avoid revealing any clues, his reaction was almost identical to that of the other 9. This comprehension, the time spent seems to be more than just 3 hours, right? Tian Zhen of Earth Peak said, stretching his limbs while frowning. I also feel like a long time has passed. Tan Huan of Water Peak stood up, nodding as he spoke. Before, when I was in a state of profound comprehension, I didn't feel anything. But now it feels like several days have passed. It certainly doesn't seem like only 3 hours. Nangong Yi of Gold Peak also said. Evidently, before entering the profound array, they knew that people who typically entered the profound array would stay for about 3 hours, never exceeding 3.5 hours. There were many profound arrays on Cloud Continent, but no one had ever stayed in one for more than 3.5 hours. Why 3 hours? Huang Danyu asked with a bewildered expression. Yes, why 3 hours? Duanling Tian followed Huang Danyu's question, his expression blank. Currently, Duanling Tian was naturally playing dumb, but no one saw through him. Peak. Master Chi Yu didn't tell you? Nangong Yi was first startled, then began to explain his understanding of the profound array to Duanling Tian and Huang Danyu. Anyone who enters the profound array can generally only stay inside for about 3 hours. To this day, throughout the entire Cloud Continent, no one has ever been heard of as an exception. Nangong Yi finished speaking in one breath. I see. Duanling Tian and Huang Danyu suddenly understood. Duanling Tian, however, secretly scoffed at Nangong Yi's statement. If his spiritual power was strong enough to absorb all of that profound power, he could definitely stay in the profound array for an even longer time. As for why ordinary people could only stay for 3 hours, he naturally knew the reason. It was precisely because those people could only absorb and digest 1% of a certain profound power that integrated into the profound array. 1%, regardless of comprehension ability, only required 3 hours to absorb and digest completely. Of course, even just 1% was enough to help one's profound advance to a certain level. I also feel like I stayed in there for more than 3 hours. It felt like several days. Could it be that being in that profound array makes one feel like time passes extremely slowly? Huang Danyu frowned, thought for a moment, and then asked, at once, the 10 young prodigies, filled with questions, all looked towards the peak masters of the 5-element sect's various peaks, hoping to get an answer from them. You indeed stayed. In there for more than 3 hours. To be precise, you stayed in there for 2.5 days, a total of 60 hours. The Gold Peak Master, who was also the sect master of the 5-element sect, Guochong, slowly spoke. 2.5 days? 60 hours? As Guochong's words fell, the 10 young prodigies couldn't help but be stunned. Among them was Nangong Chen of Gold Peak. His face remained aloof, without much change, but deep in his eyes there was a hint of surprise. He was clearly shocked by what his master had said. Master, didn't you say that martial artists on Cloud Continent, upon entering the profound array, can stay for a maximum of about 3 hours? What's with these 60 hours? Nangong Yi was the first to ask, his face filled with bewilderment. He couldn't understand this point at all. The other young prodigies were equally bewildered and puzzled, all looking at Guochong with questioning eyes, wanting to get an answer. From him, among them, naturally, was Duanling Tian. Although Duanling Tian knew the reason, he couldn't possibly expose it. To avoid giving himself away, he, like the other 9, pretended to be ignorant. Suddenly, Duanling Tian noticed a gaze fixed on him. This gaze was surveying him up and down as if trying to discern something from him. Duanling Tian immediately identified the owner of this gaze, the Wood Peak Master, Chi Yu. Peak Master, is this... Duanling Tian looked at Chi Yu, asking through elemental energy sound transmission, his face filled with bewilderment. Duanling Tian, I remember that the profound you previously comprehended was only third level intermediate wind profound, right? I am very much looking forward to your progress after emerging from the profound array this time. Qi Yu's elemental energy sound transmission clearly reached Duan Tian's ears. The word progress was emphasized with a clear implication. Duan, Ling Tian's heart skipped a beat. Did this Wood Peak master discover something? Impossible. Soon, Duan Tian denied it himself again. It must be that he thinks I'm an anomaly, and suspects that it was I who caused the profound array to stay open for 60 hours instead of the usual 3. Thinking this, Duan Tian's heart settled. He calmly responded with an elemental energy sound transmission. Peak Master, there's one thing you might not know. The profound I comprehended is not just wind profound. To be precise, wind. Profound is only the weaker of the two, void prying profound I comprehended. Duan Tian wasn't surprised that Qi Yu knew he had previously comprehended third-level intermediate wind profound. When he and Huang Danyu first arrived at Wood Peak, he had made a move. The targets at that time were Luo Chen and Hong Xi, who were now dead. At that time, he had displayed his third-level intermediate wind profound. Many Wood Peak disciples had seen it, so it was not surprising that the news reached Qi Yu, the Wood Peak master. What? Indeed, upon hearing Duan Tian's yuan, the sound transmission, Qi Yu's face showed a look of surprise. You've also comprehended another void interpretation concept? Yes. Duan Tian nodded in response. The next moment, Duan Tian withdrew his gaze from Qi Yu and looked back at Guo Chong, the sect leader of the Five-Element sect. Facing Nangong Yi's question, Guo Chong finally spoke. Logically, you should have come out after staying in the profound formation for 3 hours. This time you stayed inside for a full 60 hours. Not to mention you, even we find it strange and puzzling, Guo Chong said. Guo Chong's words stunned the group of young talents. However, one thing is certain. Guo Chong's gaze swept over the 10 young talents, including Duan Tian, one by one, and he slowly said, the profound formation lasting for 60 hours can only mean 2 things. First, something unexpected happened to the profound formation. Second, someone continuously absorbed concept energy for 60 hours. As he spoke, a sharp glint appeared in Guo Chong's eyes. Continuously absorbed concept energy. For 60 hours? As soon as Guo Chong said this, the 10 young talents, including Duan Tian, were completely dumbfounded. If someone truly continuously absorbed concept energy for that long, to what level would their comprehended concept have advanced? Apart from Duan Tian, the other 9 young talents, including Huang Danyu, were greatly shocked. Perhaps seeing the thoughts of most of the young talents, Guo Chong continued, based on the hundreds of concept fragments I placed into the profound formation, if someone truly continuously absorbed concept energy for 60 hours, even if they had only comprehended first-level void interpretation concept before, their concept would have definitely broken through to 4th-level transformation. Concept or above after coming out of the profound formation. 4th-level transformation. Concept? Hearing Guo Chong's words, the group of young talents who had just recovered their senses were once again completely stunned. 4th level. Transformation concept. What kind of concept was that? Among them, the strongest void interpretation concept previously comprehended was by the Nangong brothers of Golden Peak, both of whom had comprehended 8th level void interpretation concept. 8th level void interpretation concept was only comparable to the strength of 90 ancient horned dragons. 4th level transformation concept, however, was comparable to the strength of 500 ancient horned dragons. Between 9th level void interpretation concept and 1st level transformation concept, there was a chasm, a vast difference. The former was only comparable to the strength of 100 ancient horned dragons, while the latter was comparable to the strength of 200 ancient horned dragons. For transformation concept, each level increase added the strength of 100 ancient horned dragons. Who is it? For a time, the 10 young talents, except for Nangong Chen, all looked at each other, seemingly wanting to know who had continuously absorbed concept energy for so long. Who was that freak? Seeing the group of young talents looking at each other, Duan Tian naturally followed suit, pretending to be ignorant. It's not necessarily that someone continuously absorbed concept energy for that long. Perhaps something happened. To the profound formation, Guo Chong added, seeing the 9 young talents looking at each other. Now, you should more or less be able to sense the changes in the concept you've comprehended. However, you probably can't confirm the exact level of your current concept. Guo Chong stared intently at the 10 young talents before him, then said, now, I will call out your names, and you will each display your concept. so that we can see your gains from this time in the profound formation." As soon as Guo Chong said this, the eyes of the peak leaders of the other 4 peaks suddenly lit up, especially the Wood Peak leader, Qi Yu, who gave Duanling Tian a meaningful glance, a half-smile appearing on his face. It was as if he was saying to Duanling Tian, "You brat, since you said you've comprehended 2 void interpretation concepts, then I'd like to see what level your other void interpretation concept has reached." Duanling Tian naturally noticed Qi Yu's gaze and guessed Qi Yu's current thoughts, but he didn't mind. Since he had said those words earlier, it was naturally because he was confident that Qi Yu wouldn't be able to confirm that he was the one who had continuously absorbed concept energy for 60 hours. Of course, although he had absorbed concept energy for 60 hours, it wasn't just one type of concept. If he had only absorbed one type of concept for that long, as Guo Chong had just said, his concept would have definitely advanced to 4th level transformation concept or above. While inside the profound formation, he had absorbed 4 types of concept energy in total. For each type of concept energy, it took him 30 hours to fully absorb it. Originally, for the 4 types of concept energy, he would have needed a total of 120 hours to absorb them all. But because his consciousness could split into 2, allowing him to comprehend 2 different concepts simultaneously, his efficiency doubled. Therefore, he only spent 60 hours to absorb all 4 types of concept energy. The 4 concepts he comprehended had also greatly improved. Duanling Tian's gaze fell on Hu Fei, and he snorted inwardly. After coming out of the profound formation, Hu Fei's brows had been tightly furrowed. He had noticed this early on. As for the reason, he could easily guess it. What's going on? Hearing Guo Chong say that they were to display their improved concepts, Hu Fei hesitated slightly, because he felt that the concept he had comprehended didn't seem to have improved at all compared to before he entered. Of course, without demonstrating it now, he couldn't be entirely sure if it hadn't improved. According to Master, after entering the profound formation, even if I was at my worst, I should have been able to advance my fire concept further, comprehending 8th level intermediate fire concept. Hu Fei thought to himself, even comprehending 9th level intermediate fire concept isn't impossible. After all, my 7th level intermediate fire concept is only 1 step away from 8th level intermediate fire concept. Perhaps my fire concept has already broken through, but because I just came out of the profound formation, my senses are a bit dull. That must be it. Thinking this, Hu Fei felt relieved, and his tightly furrowed brows relaxed. In his opinion, even if he was at his worst, he wouldn't fail to break through his fire concept by 1 level in the profound formation. That was almost impossible to happen. However, Hu Fei never dreamed. Duanling Tian's existence, however, could turn many impossibilities in his eyes into possibilities. This Hu Fei, he didn't notice, did he? When Duanling Tian saw Hu Fei's brows relax, he couldn't help but be stunned. Are his reactions that slow? Let's start with you. Suddenly, Duanling Tian's thoughts were pulled back by Guo Chong's voice. Immediately after, he saw Guo Chong looking at the male disciple from Earth Peak, asking him to display the breakthrough concept he had comprehended in the profound formation. This male disciple was another young disciple from Earth Peak, besides Tianzhen. Yes, sect leader. Hearing Guo Chong's words, the Earth Peak disciple did not dare to delay and respectfully responded. Immediately after, he saw his face become serious and a sharp, unparalleled aura emanated from him, soaring into the sky, as if it could tear apart everything in the air. Immediately after, everyone present saw a layer of solid, translucent true energy suddenly appear on the Earth Peak disciple's body, a solid saber key. The saber key enveloped the Earth Peak disciple, covering him as if transforming into a giant saber intending to soar into the sky. Saber concept. That instant, everyone present recognized the concept displayed by the Earth Peak disciple. Whoosh! At the same time, above the void, the power of heaven and earth stirred, and vast amounts of heaven and earth power quickly gathered into a solid heaven and earth phenomenon. One after another, ancient horned dragon phantoms appeared. A total of 70, the strength of 70 ancient horned dragons. 6th level intermediate saber concept. Tiangu's eyes lit up, and he said with some pleasant surprise, "Good boy, I remember that before you entered the profound formation, you had only comprehended 4th level intermediate saber concept. With the help of the profound formation, you actually leaped 2 levels in one go, comprehending 6th level intermediate saber concept." The Earth Peak disciple chuckled, then looked at Tianzhen beside him, humbly saying, "Senior brother Tianzhen is definitely much stronger than me." "You brat! Are you trying to harm me?" Tianzhen scolded with a laugh. I originally comprehended 5th level void interpretation concept. If you say that, later when I display my concept, if I haven't broken through to 7th level void interpretation concept, wouldn't you have surpassed me? Senior brother Tianzhen, you definitely comprehended 7th level void interpretation concept. The Earth Peak disciple quickly remedied. Their conversation made the 5 peak leaders couldn't help but smile. Tianzhen, I'd like to see if you've been surpassed by him. You too display the concept you've now comprehended. Guochong looked at Tianzhen and said with a smile, "Yes, sect leader." Tianzhen responded. Then his expression became serious, and he felt a little uneasy, although he could clearly sense that his current concept had greatly changed compared to before entering the profound formation, and he confirmed that his concept had broken through, but exactly how much it had broken through he was temporarily unaware. Only by fully displaying his concept and triggering the heaven and earth phenomenon could he confirm the specific level of the concept he had now comprehended. 10 days ago, during the 5 Peaks battle, the concept this Tianzhen displayed was 5th level wind concept. Duanling Tian's gaze immediately fell on Tianzhen. Everyone else's gaze was the same. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. As bursts of wind howls rose, strands of azure true wind swept around Tianzhen's body like wind dragons coiling around him. Whoosh. As wisps of azure gale force wind appeared around Tianzhen's body, above his head in the void the power of heaven and earth surged, and a heaven and earth phenomenon began to take shape. Illusions of ancient horned dragons gradually appeared. 10, 20, 30. The number was still increasing. Finally, it settled at 80. 7th level intermediate wind concept. Everyone was somewhat surprised by Tianzhen's progress. One must know that the difficulty of progressing from 5th level void interpretation concept to 7th level void interpretation concept was not comparable to the difficulty of progressing from 4th level void interpretation concept to 6th level void interpretation concept. Tianzhen breathed a sigh of relief after confirming that he had comprehended the 7th level intermediate wind concept. Good, good. Tiangu laughed heartily, seeing his son make such great progress. Congratulations, Peak Master Tiangu. Yufeng looked at Tiangu with complex eyes, forced a smile, and offered her congratulations. Thank you, Peak Master Yufeng. I believe. Tanhuan, just like my useless son, has also comprehended the 7th level void interpretation concept. Tiangu responded with a smile. I'll take that as a good omen. Yufeng nodded, then looked at Tanhuan with anticipation. Now, Tanhuan, noticing Yufeng's gaze, had beads of sweat forming on her forehead. Her current mood was the same as Tianzhen's just now. Although she also vaguely sensed that her water concept had improved, she couldn't confirm exactly how much it had improved. Tanhuan. Just as everyone's gaze, following the conversation between Tiangu and Yufeng, and then Yufeng's gaze fell upon Tanhuan, Guochong also looked at Tanhuan. Yes, Secmaster? Tanhuan responded, and wisps of water vapor began to emanate from her body, eventually transforming into swirling blue waves, which was her comprehended water concept. The blue waves enveloped her, as if forming a light blue shield surrounding Tanhuan completely. At the same time, the power of heaven and earth surged above the void, finally converging into illusions of ancient horned dragons. Finally, the illusions of ancient horned dragons in the heaven and earth phenomenon stopped. Increasing. 7th level intermediate water concept. Looking at the 80 illusions of ancient horned dragons above Tanhuan's head in the void, everyone's eyes lit up. Tanhuan's progress was the same as Tianzhen's, seeing that she had also comprehended the 7th level void interpretation concept. Tanhuan breathed a sigh of relief and looked at Yufeng with a smile. Master, your disciple has not failed you. Yufeng nodded in satisfaction. After Tanhuan, Guochong called out another female disciple from Water Peak. This female disciple also comprehended the water concept. Before entering the profound array, she had only comprehended the 3rd level intermediate water concept. Now, after coming out of the profound array, she had comprehended the 5th level intermediate water concept. You. Next, Guochong called out the male disciple from Fire Peak, other than Hu Fei. The male disciple from Fire Peak, like the male disciple from Earth Peak, both had their void interpretation concepts improved from 4th level to 6th level, an increase of 2 levels. Hu Fei. Soon, Guochong looked at Hu Fei. Guochong calling out Hu Fei's name made Duanling Tian's eyes light up, and a faint, almost imperceptible smile, a smile of a successful conspiracy, appeared on the corner of his lips. While still in the profound array, after he used his spiritual power to manipulate the profound array and extract 1/10 of each of the 4 concept powers he needed, his spiritual power, which had been integrated into the profound array, was already almost depleted. And it was at that moment that he used his spiritual power to do one last thing, giving a simple command to the profound array. The content of that command was to prevent Hu Fei from coming into contact with the concept powers he needed. In other words, inside the profound array, besides Duanling Tian gaining great benefits and the other 8 gaining considerable benefits, only Hu Fei gained absolutely nothing. In fact, Hu Fei, who had fallen into a state of concept comprehension, inside the profound array, because of Duanling Tian's mischief, experienced no difference from his usual comprehension outside. I'm really looking forward to the expression on Hu Fei's face when he sees that his fire concept hasn't improved at all. Duanling Tian's heart stirred and the smile on his lips grew wider. Duanling Tian, what are you smiling about? Huang Danyo stood beside Duanling Tian and happened to see the smile on the corner of Duanling Tian's lips, so he couldn't help but ask with a Yuan Li sound transmission. At the same time, driven by curiosity, Huang Danyu followed Duan Ling Tian's gaze, and it landed precisely on Hu Fei, who had just been called out by Guo Chong. Could it be related to Hu Fei? Huang Danyu's heart skipped a beat. Nothing. Duanling Tian shook his head, responding with a Yuan Li sound transmission. However, Huang Danyu didn't believe Duanling Tian's words. His gaze was fixed on Hu Fei, feeling that Duanling Tian must have left something unsaid. His intuition told him that something was definitely going on with Hu Fei. As Guo Chong called out Hu Fei's name, everyone's eyes fell on Hu Fei, making him the focus of attention. Hu Fei, the personal disciple of Fire Peak Master. Among the 5 Element Sect disciples, a nickname, White-Eyed Wolf, was secretly given to Hu Fei, the story of Hu Fei betraying Wood Peak, which had saved his life and nurtured him, and joining Fire Peak, despite being 10 years old, was still looked down upon by the 5 Element Sect disciples. However, although Hu Fei's reputation was not good, his talent and comprehension were renowned in the 5 Element Sect, second only to the Nangong brothers of Gold Peak. Peak Master Chabai, your Hu Fei is one of the 5 Element Sect's contemporary young generation disciples, second only to the Nangong brothers of Gold Peak. He originally comprehended the 7th level intermediate fire concept. Coming out of the profound array, comprehending the 9th level intermediate fire concept should not be a problem, right? Yufeng asked Chabai with a smile. Peak Master? Yufeng, you're mistaken, just as a smile appeared on Chang's face, and he was about to respond to Yufeng. Tiangu interjected, what you're saying is old news. Now, our 5 Element Sect's contemporary young generation has 2 more, Duanling Tian and Huang Danyu, whose talents are no less than Hu Fei's. Duanling Tian, Huang Danyu. As soon as Tiangu spoke, Yufeng couldn't help but be startled. She then glanced at Duanling Tian and Huang Danyu, giving an awkward smile. I almost forgot about them. Chabai's face darkened. Although he disliked Tiangu's words, he couldn't refute them because it was an undeniable fact. Before Hu Fei entered the profound array, his comprehended fire concept was only a step away from the 8th level intermediate fire concept. This time, coming out of the profound array, he must have already comprehended the 9th level intermediate fire concept. Just as most people's attention shifted to the conversation between Tiangu and Yufeng, Chabai said loudly, his words were full of confidence in Hu Fei. Sure enough, as Chabai's voice fell, everyone's attention shifted back to him. Peak Master Chabai, congratulations. Yufeng congratulated Chabai. Congratulations. Guochong and Tiangu also congratulated Chabai. Immediately after, gazes converged on Hu Fei once more, and Guochong said with a smile, Hu Fei, begin. Hu Fei nodded, and wisps of faint flames immediately appeared around his body, gradually solidifying. Wait! Just then, a sharp shout suddenly rang out, startling Hu Fei into a shiver, and the wisps of flames that had not yet fully solidified around his body dissipated. In an instant, including Hu Fei, everyone's gaze converged on the source of the sound. There stood a young man dressed in purple. Duanling Tian, what do you want to do? Hu Fei's face darkened, his eyes filled with ferocity. Originally, when his master spoke those words full of confidence in him, although he was still a little nervous, he still mustered up the courage to display his fire concept. In his opinion, since everyone else had made such great progress, he couldn't be an exception. Therefore, he was quite confident that he had comprehended the 9th level intermediate fire concept. Although he felt that his fire concept was no different from before entering the profound array, he only thought that it was because he had just come out of the profound array and hadn't adapted yet. Chiyu, is this how you discipline your Wood Peak disciples? Chabai cast a cold glance at Duanling Tian, then looked at Chiyu, sneering. Chiyu looked at Duanling Tian in confusion, ignoring Chabai. Duanling Tian, is something wrong? Guochong frowned. Duanling Tian's sharp shout just now was equivalent to interrupting him, causing a hint of dissatisfaction to arise in him. Sect Master, I apologize. I just wanted to say something to pique Master Cha Bai. If I don't say it, it'll be stuck in my heart. Duanling Tian offered Guo Chong an apologetic smile, then looked at Cha Bai. In an instant, including Guo Chong, everyone's gaze shifted to Cha Bai. They were all curious about what Duanling Tian wanted to say to Cha Bai. What do you want to say? Cha Bai's face darkened. Peak Master. Cha Bai, it's like this. I'm someone who can't stand it when people brag in front of me. You just said that Hu Fei comprehended the 9th level intermediate fire concept, but I don't believe it. I think you're bragging. Duanling Tian's tone was initially calm, but as he continued, it became full of gunpowder. Bragging. As soon as Duanling Tian finished speaking, everyone present was stunned. This Duanling Tian saying that Fire Peak Master Cha Bai was bragging? The words he couldn't hold back. Were these? Including Chi Yu, everyone's gaze swept across Duanling Tian, feeling that he was simply too bold. Cha Bai, after all, was the Fire Peak Master. Now, Duanling Tian actually publicly questioned. Cha Bai saying he was bragging. Provocation, naked provocation. Presumptuous. Cha Bai's face changed, and he couldn't help but roar in anger. Peak Master. Cha Bai, I'm someone who can't tolerate even a speck of dust in my eyes. If I inadvertently hit a nerve, please don't blame me. Duanling Tian looked at Cha Bai and said with a faint smile. Duanling Tian's words once again caused everyone present, except for Cha Bai and his disciple, to freeze. What exactly was Duanling Tian doing? The other 8 young disciples of the 5-element sect, with the exception of Huang Da Nu, who seemed to be deep in thought, and Nangong Chen, who maintained a cold expression, all felt a prickling sensation on their scalps, including Nangong Yi. Clearly, they were all shocked by Duanling Tian's words. Even Nangong Yi, a direct disciple of the 5-element sect's sect leader, admitted he didn't have the courage to provoke Cha Bai, the Fire Peak Master, in such a way. Duani. Ling Tian, you're looking for death. Provoked by Duanling Tian repeatedly, Cha Bai, in a fit of extreme rage, instantly had a frosty layer appear on his face, his eyes revealing a terrifying coldness, as if he wanted to devour someone. Peak Master Cha Bai, are you perhaps angry out of embarrassment? Facing the furious Cha Bai, Duanling Tian's expression remained calm as he said indifferently, or perhaps you think you weren't bragging, and that I'm slandering you? Isn't that true? Hearing Duanling Tian's words, Cha Bai couldn't help but sneer in return. Peak Master Cha Bai, if you think you weren't bragging and that I'm slandering you, then how about we make a bet? A glint of light flashed imperceptibly in Duanling Tian's eyes, but his tone remained flat and indifferent, devoid of any emotion. Bet? Hearing Duanling Tian's words, everyone, including Cha Bai and Hu Fei, was stunned. Why should I bet with you? Soon, Cha Bai disdainfully glanced at Duanling Tian and sarcastically said, Do you, of all people, qualify? Haha, it seems, Peak Master Cha Bai, you're scared. Duanling Tian laughed heartily, and after his laughter subsided, he mocked him without restraint. Do you think your little goading will work on me? Cha Bai, the dignified Peak Master of the Fire Peak of the 5-element sect, had traversed the world for most of his life. What kind of situation hadn't he seen? With just a word, he saw through Duanling Tian's intentions, his tone filled with disdain. What if I bet with you that Hu Fei hasn't even comprehended the 8th level intermediate fire intent? After being seen through, Duanling Tian not only didn't get angry, but instead asked with a pleasant expression, 8th level intermediate, fire intent? Cha Bai was first stunned, then couldn't help but burst into laughter. Are you joking? My direct disciple, Hu Fei, was already just one step away from comprehending the 8th level intermediate fire intent. Now he's come out of the profound array, and you're saying he hasn't comprehended the 8th level intermediate fire intent? Towards the end, Cha Bai looked at Duanling Tian with a mocking smile, as if he were looking at a huge joke. I'll bet you. If Hu Fei's fire intent hasn't improved at all, and is still only at the 7th level intermediate fire intent, you lose a 7th level lightning intent fragment to me. If Hu Fei's fire intent has improved to 8th level intermediate, fire intent or above, I will switch to your tutelage, join the Fire Peak, and swear an oath by the 9-9 lightning tribulation to never betray you for life. How about it? Duanling Tian didn't answer Cha Bai's words, but instead spoke indifferently to himself. Duanling Tian's words clearly entered Hu Fei's ears, causing Hu Fei's expression to change instantly, as if he had suddenly remembered something. Could it be that my fire intent truly hasn't improved at all, just as I sensed? Hu Fei's heart sank, and an ominous premonition vaguely arose. But even if that's the case, how could this Duanling Tian possibly know? Regarding this, Hu Fei was completely perplexed. In his opinion, that profound array was left behind by a martial emperor powerhouse. How mysterious it was. Almost everyone who entered it could gain immense benefits. Logically, he shouldn't be an exception. Even if he truly became that exception, how could Duanling Tian know? Duanling Tian's words not only entered Hu Fei's ears, but also Chabai's ears, Qi Feng's ears, and everyone present's ears. Duanling Tian wanted to bet with Chabai. He bet that after Hu Fei emerged from the profound array, his fire intent had not improved at all, and was still at the 7th level intermediate fire intent. If Hu Fei made any breakthrough, then Duanling Tian would lose. If he won, he would receive a 7th level lightning intent fragment from Chabai. If he lost, he would give himself entirely to Chabai, to the Fire Peak, and swear an oath by the 9-9 lightning tribulation to never betray them for life. In an instant, the entire place was in an uproar. Except for Qi Yu and Huang Dan Yu, who were deep in thought, everyone else, including the 5-element sect leader Guo Chong, couldn't help but stare dumbfounded. In their opinion, the bet, Tanu Damade with Chabai, was almost certain to be a loss. Perhaps this Duanling Tian doesn't want to stay in the Wood Peak and is determined to switch to the Fire Peak. This bet he proposed is just an excuse. Peakmaster Chabai must have made some serious promises to Duanling Tian to poach him to the Fire Peak, and he was tempted. However, he was too embarrassed to directly betray the Wood Peak, fearing he would become the second Hu Fei, scorned by others. So he chose to switch to the Fire Peak in this manner. Including Tan Huan and Tianzhen, several disciples of the 5-element sect couldn't help but think to themselves. Besides this, they couldn't understand why Duanling Tian would actively make this bet with Chabai, because it was clear that Duanling Tian was bound to lose. Hu Fei had already comprehended the 7th level intermediate fire intent, not to mention that before he entered the profound array, he was only one step away from comprehending the 8th level intermediate fire intent. Even if he had just comprehended the 7th level intermediate fire intent before entering the profound array, he would definitely be able to comprehend the 8th level intermediate fire intent after coming out of the profound array. Yet now, Duanling Tian was actually saying that after Hu Fei entered and exited the profound array, his intent comprehension remained stagnant, staying at the 7th level intermediate fire intent. This was almost impossible. Only Qi Yu and Huang Dan Yu looked at Duanling Tian from afar, deep in thought. What exactly does Duanling Tian want to do? Looking at Hu Fei's expression, could it be? Qi Yu was very observant and quickly noticed the abnormality in Hu Fei's expression, his heart sinking. The scene before him made him even more certain that Duanling Tian was deliberately luring Chabai into a trap, his goal being to obtain a 7th level lightning intent fragment from Chabai. This little fellow, if he needed a lightning intent fragment, he could have just told me, couldn't he? It seems he doesn't want to owe me a favor, Qi Yu murmured to himself, sighing. Towards the end, I knew it. Duanling Tian's smile just now was a bit off. There really was something fishy. Wang Danyo stared at Duanling Tian, a smug smile appearing at the corner of his mouth, an expression that said, "Brother Niu, I saw through you long ago." "You? Are you serious?" Chabai was stunned for a long time by Duanling Tian's words, and after a while he finally came back to his senses, staring at Duanling Tian with shining eyes, asking loudly. He had to admit that before this, he had many complaints about Duanling Tian, but that was also because Duanling Tian had humiliated his direct disciple, Hu Fei. If Duanling Tian were a disciple of the Fire Peak, even if Duanling Tian had truly humiliated his direct disciple, Hu Fei, he would not resent Duanling Tian. He would only be glad that his Fire Peak had produced a genius disciple even more outstanding than his own direct disciple. Now, Duanling Tian said that as long as his direct disciple, Hu Fei, comprehended intermediate fire intent of the 8th level or above, he would switch to his tutelage, join the Fire Peak, and he was willing to swear an oath by the 9-9. Lightning tribulation to never betray his Fire Peak for life. For a moment, he was completely overwhelmed by joy. He didn't even have time to think about why Duanling Tian would propose such an absurd bet, risking his entire life for a 7th level lightning intent fragment. At this moment, he only knew that he was bound to win, and Duanling Tian would also switch to their Fire Peak. Perhaps it was precisely because Duanling Tian had considered this point that he would use himself as the stake. That's right, but I wonder, Peakmaster Chabai, do you dare to bet with me? Facing Chabai's loud inquiry, Duanling Tian nodded, then questioned him back with a look of doubt. Since you intend to switch to our Fire Peak, how could I refuse? Duanling Tian, you can rest assured, as long as you switch to our Fire Peak, both Hu Fei and I will let bygones be bygones with you, and will no longer dwell on past matters. Furthermore, I guarantee that the Fire Peak will absolutely not mistreat you. Chabai, who was so excited he was a bit disoriented, said with a smile. Clearly, Chabai had accepted Duanling Tian's bet. Good. Duanling Tian also smiled, a very bright smile. Wait. Just then, Chabai's expression tightened and he suddenly exclaimed in surprise, Duanling Tian frowned. Could it be that Chabai had realized something? Or perhaps Hu Fei had already realized it and told him everything, causing him to have second thoughts? Soon, Duanling Tian knew he had overthought. Sect leader, the bet between Duanling Tian and me, I ask that you be our witness. In his excitement, Chabai didn't forget to ask Guo Chong, the five-element sect leader, to be a witness. He did this, of course, not because he feared Duanling Tian would go back on his word, but because he feared Qi Yu would intervene afterwards. He knew Qi Yu's strength. He was far from being an opponent. If Qi Yu truly wanted to snatch Duanling Tian, who had switched to their fire peak back to the wood peak, he really couldn't stop Qi Yu, and in the end, it would only be for nothing. Guo Chong frowned, looking at Qi Yu immediately, as if asking for Qi Yu's opinion. Qi Yu nodded. Hu Fei! Seeing Qi Yu nod, Guo Chong acknowledged Chabai, and then looked at Hu Fei, who was standing far away, still in a daze, and called out. However, Hu Fei didn't react, standing there motionless as if he were enchanted. Hu Fei. Seeing that Hu Fei didn't snap out of it for a long time, Chabai became anxious. Slap? Chabai took a few steps to Hu Fei's front and slapped him on the back of his head, waking him up. Master! Master! After Hu Fei regained consciousness, the first thing he saw was Chabai standing in front of him, and he couldn't help but call out in panic. What are you still standing there for? Hurry up and display your fire intent. Chabai's voice was like thunder, and he glared, shouting anxiously. Chabai was now as anxious as a burning fire, afraid that if Hu Fei displayed his fire intent, a moment later, Duanling Tian would regret making that bet. Once Duanling Tian went back on his word, their fire peak would lose a monstrous disciple who could make the fire peak the number one peak of the five-element sect, 3 years from now. Yes! Yes! Hu Fei was startled by Chabai's sudden shout, trembling and his mind a blur. He didn't have time to think about anything else, hurriedly nodding without any hesitation. At the same time, wisps of flame gradually solidified and took shape around him, rising up and then enveloping his entire being, making him appear like a god of fire. Whoosh! Simultaneously, above the void, the power of heaven and earth surged, and a celestial phenomenon gradually took shape, with ancient horned dragon phantoms appearing before everyone's eyes. Immediately, everyone, including Duanling Tian, focused their gaze. Duanling Tian is definitely going to lose. This was the thought in most people's minds at this moment. Although Duanling Tian had initiated the bet, they didn't believe he could win. They mostly thought that Duanling Tian had been persuaded by Fire Peak Master Chabai and intended to leave Wood Peak to join Fire Peak, and that the bet was just a deceptive pretext. Only a few people were thoughtful. First, of course, were Qi Yu and Huang Dan Yu. Secondly, there was the five-element sect master Guo Chong and his personal disciple Nangong Chen, whose eyes held a hint of surprise and doubt. They clearly realized that things were not so simple. Soon, the ancient horned dragon phantoms above Hu Fei's had solidified, and their number continued to increase. 10, 20, 30. Not long after, the number of ancient horned dragon phantoms stopped increasing, and they circled down, clearly appearing in everyone's sight. This, most people's pupils contracted, looking at the ancient horned dragon phantoms above the void, with shock. Some even thought they were seeing things or had misread and couldn't help but rub their eyes hard, only confirming after a while that they hadn't made a mistake. 80 ancient horned dragons' power? Tianzhen looked at the 80 ancient horned dragon phantoms above the void and muttered, It's really 7th level mid-grade fire intent. But how is this possible, 7th level? Mid-grade fire intent. This was precisely the intent Hu Fei was currently displaying, and it was no different from his intent before entering the profound transformation array. In other words, Hu Fei's intent showed no change before, and after entering and exiting the profound transformation array, he had not gained even the slightest benefit. What's going on? For a moment, whether it was Earth Peak Master Tian Gu or Water Peak Master Yu Feng, as well as a group of young talents including Nangong Yi, their faces showed confusion. In their opinion, this was almost impossible. Yet, the scene before them kept assaulting their visual nerves, constantly telling them that all of this was real. Peak Master Chabai, lost? Suddenly, someone whispered, though no one knew who. Although the voice wasn't loud in the dead silence, it sounded particularly jarring. It's you, Duanling Tian. It's you who did it. What exactly did you do to me? Suddenly, a hysterical roar echoed, making everyone snap out of their daze. It was Hu Fei, now fully awake, who withdrew his gaze from the 80 ancient horned dragon phantoms above his head and glared at Duanling Tian as if ready to fight him to the death. When he first came out of the profound transformation array, he felt something was off. At that time, he tried to sense his fire intent and found that it seemed to be no different from when he first entered the profound transformation array. He was puzzled for a while, only thinking that it was because he had just come out of the profound transformation array and couldn't clearly sense the change in fire intent, which was why it was like this. Later, seeing Tianzhen, Tanhuan, and others display intent that had improved by 2 whole levels, he completely relaxed. In his opinion. If everyone else had improved, it was impossible for him not to have improved, and just as Sectmaster Guo Chong called on him to demonstrate, Duanling Tian stopped him, mocked his master for bragging, and even made a bet with his master, betting that his fire intent had not improved at all and was still 7th level mid-grade fire intent. At the time, he was completely baffled, racking his brain but unable to figure out why Duanling Tian would say his intent hadn't broken through. Coupled with his own sensing, he couldn't help but feel a little guilty. Then, after his mind wandered, he was startled by his master's shout and lost his composure, hastily displaying his fire intent. When he saw that he had only comprehended 7th level mid-grade fire intent, he was dumbfounded. Completely dumbfounded. What on earth was going on? The first thing he thought of after reacting was Duanling Tian. In his opinion, all of this must have been Duanling Tian's doing. Otherwise, how could Duanling Tian have known that he made no progress in the profound transformation array? Could it really be Duanling Tian? Seeing Hu Fei roaring at Duanling Tian, everyone else's gazes also fell on Duanling Tian. They had heard the bet Duanling Tian made with Chabai, just now very clearly. His words seemed to confirm that Hu Fei's fire intent had not broken through before and after entering and exiting the profound transformation array. When they first heard Duanling Tian make such a bizarre bet, most people only thought that Duanling Tian was doing it on purpose, wanting to use it as an excuse to switch to Fire Peak and become Chabai's disciple. But now, it seemed Duanling Tian clearly had no such intention. Because Hu Fei's fire intent had indeed not improved before and after entering and exiting the profound transformation array, remaining stagnant. At this moment, they recalled Duanling Tian's words from earlier, feeling that it was simply a divine prophecy. Hearing Hu Fei's roar, the first thought that popped into their minds was undoubtedly that Duanling Tian had done something to Hu Fei inside the profound transformation array, preventing Hu Fei from using the power of intent to comprehend a higher level of fire intent. Duanling Tian, what exactly did you do to Hu Fei? Chabai's eyes turned bloodshot as he stared at Duanling Tian and asked in a deep voice. As the Fire Peak master of the 5-element sect, he had roamed for most of his life, and this was the first time he had suffered such a great loss, and it was at the hands of a young man less than 30 years old. This made him feel ashamed and angry from the bottom of his heart, wishing he could directly attack and kill Duanling Tian. However, when he noticed that Woodpeak Master Chi Yu had locked onto his QE, he knew that even if he risked his life, he probably wouldn't be able to harm Duanling Tian in the slightest. Therefore, he could only try his best to suppress the endless fury in his heart. What could I do to him? Facing Chabai's questioning and a series of puzzled gazes, Duanling Tian said calmly, Peak Master Chabai, everything requires evidence. You shouldn't make false accusations. Duanling Tian's words made Chabai exasperated and furious, saying with shame and anger, if it wasn't you who did it, how would you know that Hu Fei's fire intent didn't improve after coming out of the profound transformation array? Chabai's words made everyone nod secretly. Yes. It was already strange that Hu Fei's intent hadn't improved after coming out of the profound transformation array. However, what was even stranger was that Duanling Tian actually knew that Hu Fei's intent hadn't improved. The two together made people unable to help, but let their imaginations run wild. Peak Master Chabai, you're acting like this now. Surely you're not regretting making that bet with me, are you? That bet, you personally asked the Sect Master to witness it. You wouldn't go back on your word, would you? Duanling Tian didn't respond to Chabai, but instead changed the subject, saying indifferently, that bet, I will naturally honor it. But on this matter, you must give Hu Fei an explanation, give me an explanation, and give Fire Peak an explanation. Chabai's gaze was sharp as he said in a deep voice. Towards the end, he used the entire Fire Peak to pressure Duanling Tian. Since, Peak Master Chabai, you are willing to honor that bet, then that's even better. However, I truly don't trust your character. How about this? You first hand over that 7th level Thunder Intent fragment to me, and then I'll give you an explanation. Duan Lingtian grinned, speaking unhurriedly. You! Hearing Duan Lingtian's words, Chabai was furious, again having the impulse to directly attack Duan Lingtian. In the end, due to his apprehension of Woodpeak Master Qi Yu, he ultimately did not make a move. I hope you can give me a satisfactory explanation. Chabai took a deep breath, suppressing his extreme anger, and at the same time raised his hand and threw a purple fragment, which flew straight towards Duan Lingtian. 7th level Thunder Intent fragment. Duan Lingtian, who caught the fragment, immediately had his eyes light up. He had comprehended a total of 4 kinds of intent, and also had corresponding intent fragments for those 4 kinds of intent. But among those intent fragments, only the Thunder Intent fragment was the most basic. That Thunder Intent fragment was what he had obtained after using the talisman left by his cheap old man to kill Bainan Xiang, the strongest expert of the Great Han Dynasty's imperial family. It was only a 1st level Thunder Intent fragment. Just now, he had the intention of exchanging for a Thunder Intent fragment, which was why he made such a bet with Fire Peak. Master Chabai, tricking a high-level Thunder Intent fragment from Chabai's hands. Now, with the 7th level Thunder Intent fragment in hand, Duan Lingtian's mood became joyful. Duan Lingtian, I have already given you the stake. Now, you must give me and Hu Fei an explanation. Give Fire Peak an explanation. Chabai saw that Duan Lingtian had been playing with the 7th level Thunder Intent fragment, and then fell silent, so he couldn't help but shout in a low voice.